Hey everybody, this is Ryan King, and in this Blender tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this potted plant, and then at the very end of the tutorial I'm also going to show you guys how to make a little animation, just kind of like a rotating animation, a looping animation, so that when it rotates around it just continues to loop. So I'll be doing that in the tutorial as well at the end. And all of the materials and textures are procedural in Blender, so I don't have to use any textures or HDRIs or any of that. Everything I'm going to be doing is in Blender. And I'm going to be doing this in Blender version 2.82a, and I'm also going to be using a cycles render. And to see my screencast keys, they're going to be right down here, so you can see what I'm clicking just right down there. And let's get started. So I'm just going to delete everything, and I'll press Shift A, and I'll just add a circle. And right here in the vertices, I'm just going to set this to 8 because we don't need it to be that detailed. I'll tab into edit mode. We're just going to press F to fill that face, and I'll go to front view and just extrude this up. And so this is going to be the pot. We're making the pot first, and then I'll just extrude that up a little bit. And then I'm going to make the little lip on the pot, so I'll press E and then S, just bring that up, just bring that out like that. And then I'll press E and extrude that up and scale it out a bit too. And then I'll press I and inset that, and then we'll go to front view again. I'll go to wireframe and I'll extrude this down and scale it down just so that the pot is a bit hollow inside. So there's our basic pot created. I'm going to save this file, so I'll press Ctrl S to save, and I'm just going to save this on my desktop in a folder called pottedplant.blend, and then I'll just save the Blender file like that. Okay, and then now I'm going to add a subdivision surface to smooth it out. So I'll press Ctrl 3 just to make a very strong subdivision surface. And you can see we're going to need to add some loop cuts. So I'll tab into edit mode. So I'll press Ctrl R right here, click, and then just bring this one up and just put that right there. I'll also add a loop cut right down here. And then I'm going to need to add a loop cut here. So Ctrl R, just bring that down. And then I'll press 3 to go to the face select, click on the bottom face, and just inset that with I. And that'll just sharpen that edge out. And then I also need to sharpen right here. So I'll press Ctrl R, bring that up, and Ctrl R right there too, and just sharpen up that edge. And then we need to sharpen up this edge, so Ctrl R, just like that, another one out like there, and then just sharpen up inside. So one that we're just going to bring down there, and then another one just like up there at the top. So I use right click select, so I'm going to hit W and then click on shade smooth. But if you're using the left click select, you should just be able to right click and then click shade smooth, or you can just go object and click on shade smooth right there. So now the pot is pretty much done. So now we're going to be modeling the dirt. So I'll press Shift A and I'll add a circle. We'll just bring this up just right there, just about where the dirt is going to be in the pot. I'll tab into edit mode and I'll just E and S, bring it down, and just E and S, and just continue to do that to just add a lot of geometry in there. And then I'll press F to fill that face. And I'm going to click on the pot, press H to hide it, so that then we can't see it, so it's not in our way. And I'll tab into edit mode on the dirt, and I'll press E to extrude this down. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. And you can see now we need to recalculate the normals. So I'll just select everything, and I can press Shift N just to recalculate those. And then over on the modifiers, I'm going to click on add modifier, and we're going to add a remesh modifier. So why I'm doing this is because these faces right here, they're not even. You can see this one's way bigger than this one. So I want it to be an even amount of faces so that when we add a displacement, it's going to be even amount of detail. So I'll just apply that remesh now. And now when I tab into edit mode, you can see all of these squares are about the same size. Actually, I think they all are the same size, just except these edges, but that doesn't matter. And why I extruded this out is because if you don't, it acts weird and it doesn't quite work like this. So now I can just delete this bottom area. So I'm just going to go to front view, and then I'll just go to vertices select and wireframe, just select this bottom area, and then X and delete it. So now we just have the top. Now I'll press Alt H to unhide the pot here and just click on the dirt again. I'll tab into edit mode, and I want to just give it a little bit of randomness. So I will click kind of in the center, and then I'll just click on the proportional editing. And then if I press G and Z, I can just kind of bring it up. I just kind of want the middle to be brought up a bit. And then you can also change the amount that it's pulling along with it by using the scroll wheel. And then you can just kind of select a few other areas and just kind of pull them around a bit just to make it a little bit more random, just like that. And then I'm just going to shade that smooth. And then I'll add modifier, and I'm going to add a displacement modifier. And then on the texture, I'll hit new, and then I'll click on this button, which will take us to the texture panel. And then from the type, I'm going to change that to clouds. And now you can see that's giving a cool effect. I'll change the size to something a bit smaller, and you can see there's not really enough detail. So over here, I'm going to add a subdivision surface, and I want the subdivision surface to be above the displacement. So I'll just click this arrow to just bring that up and just set the view and render to 2, and that'll just give it a lot more geometry to work with. And then the strength right here, I can just bring the strength down a lot more, just like that. And then I'm going to add one more subdivision surface to kind of smooth out these bumps. So I'll click on add modifier, subdivision surface. Maybe I'll make the strength even a bit less. And I can also tab in edit mode and just kind of bring this center up a bit more. Okay, and then I might scale the whole thing just a bit smaller. So I'll press SZ, just kind of bring that down. And there you can see, there's our dirt. So that's that. We'll go file and just save this again. And now we're going to be modeling the leaf. So I'm going to add a plane. I'll just move this plane over here just so that we can see it. I'll go to top view and I'll tab into edit mode. And I'm just going to model the shape of the leaf from the top down. So I'll select these two vertices, extrude them out, and just scale them in. And I can also turn off proportional editing because I don't need that anymore. And I'm just scaling these in like that, extrude, and then scale them down. Maybe bring this one up a bit. I'll press Ctrl R, just add a loop cut right there, just scale this up, and then extrude this and bring it down. So now we have kind of a basic leaf shape. And then I'll also press Ctrl R, scroll wheel up to add 2 loop cuts, and then I will deselect the 2 sides of these and then just scale these down just like that, just because I don't want it to be that big. And this is going to be used to add kind of a groove in the center, because if you've seen leaves, they usually have a groove in the center. So I'm just going to actually select both of these loop cuts. So I'm holding down Alt and then Shift and then just clicking on these loops, and then I'll press S and X and just bring those down, just make them a bit thinner. And I'll press Ctrl R, add 1 right here in the center, just add 1 loop cut right there, and then I'll move it down just like that. And that way it's going to add a crease. So now I'm going to add a solidify. So I'll go add modifier, add a solidify, and that'll give this thickness. So I'll just bring the thickness down like that. Just make it however thick you want. Actually, that's a little too thick, I think. And now I'll press Ctrl 2, and that'll add a subdivision surface modifier, or you can just go add modifier, subdivision surface. And I'll press, I'll shade that smooth too. And now I want to make this a bit stronger. So I'll select this loop cut and just bring it down a bit more. And I'll select these and scale them in a bit just so that that crease is a lot stronger. So that's better. And then I want the leaf to kind of be rotating over a bit because it's not really realistic to be totally flat. So I'll go into edit mode, just select some of these areas and just kind of rotate them and then bring them down like that, and then do that on the other side too, like that. Okay, so now our leaf is kind of leaning over, which looks more realistic. And right here at the very edge, this vertice, I think I'll just pull it up just so that that kind of is a bit more evened out. And I'll probably just bring this out a bit. There we go. So now it's more flat right there. And over on this other side here, this vertex right here, I'm also going to bring this up just like that to kind of get away that, just to make it a bit flatter. Just make sure the solidify modifier is as thick as you want. You can still change that, so I might make it a little bit thicker. And then once that's as thick as you want, you can apply it. So now you can see it has thickness right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to 3, click on 3, and that'll do face select. And I'll just select all these 3 faces, or all these 4 faces right here. And I'll extrude these out, scale them down a bit, and I'll also scale them on the Z. Just bring that up a little bit. And now I'm going to be using an add-on that's already built into Blender to actually turn these squares into circles, one big circle. So I'm going to go File, actually go to Edit and go to Preferences. And then if you go to Add-ons, I'm going to be using two add-ons. So the one I'm going to be using right now is the Loop Tools. So if you type in Loop, you can see Mesh Loop Tools. This is a really great add-on. I use it a lot. So I'm going to be turning that on, and then also I'm going to be using the Node Wrangler. So later on when we do the materials and stuff, I'm going to use the Node Wrangler, so just turn that on too. Once those are turned on, if I press N and go to Edit, you can see here's our Loop Tools add-on, and I can just, with this selected, I can click Circle. So now we can use this for our stem. So I'll just bring this up, and I can also press N and close that. And I'll go to Side View with 3. Just kind of scale this a little bit and bring it up like this. Maybe scale it a bit down. And now I can extrude this with E and then just rotate it, bring it around, and that way we're making the stem of the plant. And then just bring it down until it goes into the ground. Just like that. And I might make it, I want to make it rotating a bit more. So I will press 1 to go to the vertice select, just box select like this area, just kind of rotate it a bit, maybe deselect that and rotate it a bit more. That actually is a little bit far coming out, so I think I might scale that in a bit. Maybe bring these in a little bit. Okay, that's better. And now to do the other leaf, so we can just duplicate this leaf. We don't need to model it again since it's already there, but what I'm going to do is tab into edit mode, and I'll actually add a loop cut probably like right here, and then I'll press extrude, I'll press E to extrude and just bring this out and rotate it, and just kind of rotate it over here. And so this is going to be our other stem. And if it's looking really weird, if we're having this weird glitches, this is because we need to recalculate the normals. So I'll just select everything and then press Shift N just to recalculate the normals, and that looks a lot better. So now I'll just Alt and click on this loop. We'll just scale it down a bit and extrude it out. Just kind of rotate it. And I want it to be a little bit more turned over this way. There we go. Maybe scale this one down a little bit. There we go. Now the leaf here, I can just B and box select the whole leaf and then go to top view, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate it, scale it down, and just rotate it over here like this. And we'll just center it up so it's really pretty close, but it has a bit of room. Just get it however I like. And then I need to select both of these. So I'm gonna Alt and select this loop, and then Shift and Alt and select this one right here. So now I've selected both of these, and I'm gonna bridge them together. So I'll press F3 to search. I'll just type in bridge, and you can see there's this bridge edge loop. So I'm gonna click on that, and that will join these together. And then I might scale this down a little bit. And there we go. So now I'm just gonna center this, maybe scale it down a little bit, and you can see the origin point is way over here. So to fix this, I'm gonna go Object, Set Origin, and Origin to Geometry. And now when we scale this, it's much more in the center. I'm also gonna add a loop cut right down here. And now you can just place this somewhere kind of in the middle of the pot. Okay, so that's the modeling done. I'm gonna go File and Save. Now we're going to set up the camera, and we're going to set up lights, and then we're going to do the materials. So let's set up some lighting real quick before we start the materials. So I'll just press Shift A, and I'm going to go to light, and I'm going to use an area light. I'm going to rotate this, kind of make it going generally in the front, but not full front, kind of on the side. I'll scale it up a bit. And over here, I'm going to make the power like 1000 watts. And this shape, I'm going to turn it from square to rectangular, and then I can just change this right here and rotate it just so that it's more of a rectangular shape. That way it'll get more area of the plant. Let's go into rendered mode, just see what that's looking like. That's pretty good. And then really quick, I want to make sure you're using Filmic Blender. So if you go to the color management over here on the render settings, make sure the view transform is Filmic, and then I just make the look high contrast kind of to bump the colors out, and this is going to give more accurate lighting. So now that I have that set up, I do want to add a rim light in the back, as that'll kind of bump the object out of the background. So I will press Shift D, duplicate this, just kind of rotate it over here. And I also need to add a camera, so I'll press Shift A, add a camera. I'll just move my view to wherever I want the camera to be, and then I'll press Control 0 to jump the camera to where I am. And then also over here on the render settings right here, the dimensions, I'm just going to set this to 1080 by 1080. So the top one, I'm just going to turn to 1080 like that, so that it's a square image. And then I can just move this around, double tap R, you can just kind of rotate it, and then also you can press G and then double tap Z to bring it in or out. And it looks like it's a bit rotated, so I'll rotate it straight. And just something like that. And then I just also want to rotate this leaf so that I can actually see the leaf a bit better. And I'll maybe move it more in the center. Also in the camera mode, I'm going to press Control B and box select the camera, just that all the rendering power goes just into the view that we need to see. So we won't have to render anything out here. It'll just render what's inside there. So now I'll just make sure this rim light is looking nice, just to give it a really bright light in the back there, just on the rim of the plant. Okay, so let's go over to shading. Let's click on the dirt material, add a new material, and call it dirt. And then I'm going to go into the camera mode, and I'll just box select the dirt area, and then just go into rendered mode. And I'll start by adding a color ramp. Drop the color ramp in there, and then I also want to add in a noise texture. So I'll add a noise texture, and then I'm going to use the node wrangler features, which is by clicking on the noise texture, making sure it's selected, and then pressing Control T, and that'll add this mapping and texture coordinate nodes. And to make sure this noise texture is really even around the object, the texture coordinate, I'm going to take the object and put it into the vector on the mapping. And then we're going to use another node wrangler feature by pressing Control Shift and clicking on the noise texture. We can preview what that looks like. So I want to make the scale of the noise texture bigger, or smaller actually, so there's more detail. And then I'll just turn the color, just put the color into the factor of the color ramp, and then put the color into the base color. And then I'll Control Shift and click on the color ramp. And this black value, I want it to be like a dark brown, something like that. And then this white color, I'm going to set to a light brown color. Just something like that, but you can make it however you want. For now, I'm going to leave it like that. And then I can just preview that and see what it looks like. Now, I do want to make the dirt a lot more rough, because dirt is pretty rough, so I'll turn this roughness up a lot. There we go. And then I want this color to also contribute to the bump. So I'll take this color, drop it into the normal, and then I'll press Shift A, add a bump node, drop it in between these two, and then just make sure this is put into the height, because this isn't actually a normal map, and so you're going to need to put it into the height. If we were using a texture map and we were using a normal map, we would want to plug it into the normal, but because this is just using the colors and just bumping it up, we're going to plug it into the height. So now you can see what it's doing. It's making it look really bumpy. I think it's too strong right now though, so I want to turn the strength down. Just turn it down, something like that maybe. Looks good. Okay, there we go. And then I can adjust the color if I want. Maybe make it a little bit more saturated. There we go. And now I want to give this dirt some like microscopic detail, because there are little like bumps in the dirt and maybe little pebbles and stuff. So I'm going to select the mapping, texture coordinate, and noise texture, and I'll duplicate these, bring them down, and I can Control Shift and click on the noise. And this one, I'm going to make the scale really small so that it has lots of detail. And then this is going to be fed into the bump to give it a lot more like detail. So this bump, I'm going to Shift D it and drop it in front of the other one. And then the color, I'll just put that into the height. And now if I Control Shift click on the bump here, you can see it has the first one and the second one on top of that. So there's a lot more detail. And I do want to make this even stronger. I'll maybe make it like 120, because I just want it to be really, really small detail. And I'll make the strength a lot smaller on this. And then just Control Shift click on the principled, and you can move the material output like that, move it out more. Maybe make it a little bit stronger. There we go, you can see that, so that's looking pretty good. And that's all I'm gonna do for the dirt material, so I'll just go File and Save again. And now let's do the pot material. So just click on the pot, click on New, we're just gonna call it Pot. And I'm gonna be doing the same thing, so I'll press Shift A, add a noise texture, press Control T to add that mapping and texture coordinate, put the normal into here, and I wanna add a little bit of color variation, so I'll plug the color into the base color, and then I'll press Shift A and add a color ramp. And then that way we can add some different colors. Make sure the object is set to the vector like that. And then I can just preview this, maybe scale it down a little bit, but not too much. And then I can just change these colors. So this black color, I want to be a brown color. And then this one, I'm going to make an even lighter brown. So just something like that maybe. And then maybe make this one a bit darker. That's too yellow, so I want to make it a little bit less yellow and more brown. And the scale, I think I actually want it to be smaller. And now we can preview the principle, and you can see right there, it's very basic, but we're going to add a lot more to it to make it look like a clay material. I think I want this to be a little bit more less saturated. There we go. That's better. Maybe just a tiny bit darker. And then just like we did the dirt, I want this to contribute to the bump just a little bit. So I'll plug this into here, into the normal, press Shift A and add a bump just so that Blender can convert it to bump data. Put this into the height, and there we go. And that's way too strong. So let's just turn the strength down, just about there. And then I do want to add some very small detail, just like we did with the dirt. So I'll just select these three, Shift D, just preview this, and I can just make it a lot smaller. And then again, Shift D, duplicate the bump, and drop the color into the height. And now you can see it's adding a lot more small detail. And also, we should change the roughness up a bit because clay is pretty rough, so maybe make the scale even bigger. So I might set it to 50, or maybe even 70. And then something that adds a lot to this material is if we add a little cracking effect. So to do that, I will just Shift D these again. So I'll just duplicate those, bring them over here, and I'm going to need to move these up a little bit just to give a bit more room right here. Okay, so I'll Control Shift click on the noise texture, and I'm going to add a color ramp. So just add a color ramp, drop this in here, and then I'm going to bring the black out and the white in. So bring these two really close, just like that, so we get this really cool effect. And the scale, I'm actually going to make it smaller because I don't want that much detail. Maybe make these even closer. There we go. And then I'm going to press Shift A. We're going to add a math node, drop it in there, and then from add, we're going to change this to warp. And you can see this is what it's doing. So it's just taking like the edges of that, and it's just making it black and then white. And then those black and white we can use to tell it where the bump is going to be. So I'm going to still play around with this and just make it as tiny as possible. So just like that, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to Shift D this bump one more time, drop it right here, and then put this value into the height there. And then I can just Control Shift click on this. And then if we change this strength up, you can see there's our cracks. Now right now it looks like it's kind of bumping out. So if we hit invert, that'll make it going back in. And this might not be an issue for you, but if it is, you can hit invert and now the cracks are going in, and then you can change the strength to whatever you like. And I'll Control Shift click on the principle, and now you can see we have this really cool cracking effect. And I think it's a little too strong, so I'll change the strength, make the strength a bit down. The last material that we need to do is the leaf. So let's click new right here. We can just call it plant or leaf or something. And we can just make the base color kind of a green, kind of a dark green. And then I'll press Shift A, and let's add a mix shader. So this mix shader, we're going to mix it with a different shader. So here's the principle that we're going to mix this with a translucent. So we'll go translucent BSDF, put this here, plug it in right there. So this is mixing two shaders, and this one I'm going to make kind of a yellowy color. So what translucency is it's allowing some of the light to go through the object. It's sort of like subsurface scattering on skin. If you turn the subsurface up, it'll like let light through, but it's a little bit different, and I think it works better for like plants and nature. Because if you've seen like sunlight coming through like leaves or something, you've probably seen that they almost look like they're glowing, and that's because it's letting light come through. So, and if we turn this all the way up here, it's going to be all translucent. If we turn this all the way down there, it's going to be all the principled. I want it to be mostly the principled, but just a little bit translucent. So maybe just something like that. Just see how that looks. And then I do want to give this a little bit of color variation because I think it just makes it look a bit nicer. So I'll press Shift A, add a noise texture, Control T to that noise texture, put the object into the vector, put the color into the base color, and then we'll add a color ramp right in there. And then we can Control Shift click on this, and the black I'm going to make a dark green, and then this one, the white, I'm going to make a light green. Just like that. And then the scale, I'm going to make it actually a bit smaller and maybe make that a little bit more yellow. And now you can see it's giving us that very slight color variation, but I do think it adds a bit and just makes it look a bit nicer. Also, on the world right here, the world settings, I'm just going to turn this to black just because I don't really want to have any world. And then I do want to add just a small light kind of going down to just kind of make everything a bit lighter. So I'll Shift D this and just rotate it. Just kind of put it on the top here. Just kind of give everything a little bit more light, just like that. Let's really quickly just parent these to the pot. So I'll click on this, Shift click on the dirt, and then lastly, Shift click on the pot, press Control P, and we're going to parent this to Object Keep Transform. And that way, when we click on the pot and we press R and Z to rotate it, you can see it's rotating around, so we can just set it to a position that we like. Now, if the pot's origin point is somewhere off, if it's like over here, and then we try to rotate this, you see it's going to do this weird effect. So to fix that, you can just click on the pot, go Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, and that way, when you rotate it, it'll just be in the very center of the pot. So now I can just rotate this to a view that I like. I think just something like that. And then I want to make the camera a bit more up, kind of looking down so we can see the leaves a bit better. And then let's make the background transparent. So I'm going to click over here. Oh, this one actually, this render setting. We'll go down here to film and then click on transparent. And that way the background now is transparent. And then click on the light paths right here, and we can just make these values smaller so that it'll render faster. So total can just be 2, diffuse and glossy can be 2. The transparency we can turn to 0. The transmission, we do need a little bit of that, because if we turn this off, it won't be able to use the translucency that we added. And then I can just turn these two off too, the reflective caustics and refractive caustics. That'll just speed up render times a little bit. And then the render, I'll just maybe make this 150 samples right here. And you can just go File, Save again, and then hit F12 to render. Now it's rendering. I can see right here, there's a few sharp edges right here. So I'm going to escape out of this, click on the pot, go over to this modifier right here, the subdivision surface, and just bump these both up. So now that's a lot smoother. So now it's going to render, and the viewport, they're both going to be 3. So if I render that again, you can see now that edge is a lot smoother. And you can see the render's finished now. Let's just go to the compositor right here, and I'll click on Use Nodes, and we can just add a few things real quick. So I'll add an alpha over, just drop this into the bottom one, and the top one we're going to make kind of a darker, little bit darker color, but still pretty white. I'll Control Shift click on the alpha over, and then we can preview that. And I can also press V to zoom this out. And then I do want to add a denoise node, and just drop the denoise node right in there, and that'll just denoise the image and make it look nicer. And then to save this, you can hit F11, and then you can go from the rendered result to viewer node, and then you can press Shift Alt S to save the image. And I'll just save this as plant.png, and you can just save the image wherever you like. And now I'm going to show you how to make a looping animation of it spinning around. So to do that, I'm going to go back to layout, and the end frame I'm going to set to 200. I think that's a pretty good amount. And then I'm going to click on the pot, and I'm going to go over here to the object settings. And right here on the rotation, I'm going to set this Z rotation to 0. So now it's rotated back. And then make sure you're on frame 1, and I'll press I, and that'll add a keyframe right there. And then I'm going to move to 201 frames. And then on this Z value right here, I'm going to set it to 360 because that's a full rotation. And then I'll hit I again with my mouse over there, and that'll add another keyframe. So why we're doing it to 201 is because a full rotation, it needs to cut off one frame, because then the last frame will go back to 1. So that'll make it look like it's looping. So now if we just play this, you can see it's looping. If we want it to just continue to loop instead of slowing down, we can just hit T with our mouse over the timeline, and then change the keyframe interpolation to linear. So on default it's set to Bezier, and that kind of adds a smooth transition, but we want it to be linear, so it's just straight. And now you can see, if we do that, you can see it's a smooth transition. So once that's all animated, we can just click on our camera and just move this around until we get it at a place that we want. That's pretty good. I like that. And then we've already set up some render settings. So what we need to do is just set an output for these images. So we'll go right over here, and right here you can see output. Let's click on here. And I'm just going to save all the frames on my desktop in a folder called frames. So I'll accept that. And then I'm going to render them out as PNG images. And then once these are all rendered out, we're going to put them in the video editor and render that out to a video. So now I'm just going to press Control F12, and that'll render all the pictures. Now I've already rendered these out with a different version that I made. So I'm just going to open up a new scene in Blender, go to video editing right here, and then I can just press Shift A, and I can add an image sequence. And I'll just find the place where I've saved all the pictures, and I'll just select everything with A, just select all the pictures, and click Add Image Strip. And now you can see it's actually squished. That's because we render these out as 1080 by 1080, so I just need to change this to 1080 right here on the resolution. And I have it set up for the space bar to press play, so you can just do that, or whatever you have set up, or you can just click play right here. And I'll just set the end frames to 200 because that's how long our animation was. And now you can see it's looping. So now let's just render this out. So you can just put an output for your final video. I'm just going to put this on the desktop in a folder. So I'll press accept right here. You can't see it because I'm in the way, but it's right down there. Press accept right there. And then you can go down here. I'm going to change this from the file format. I don't want it to be images. I want it to be a video. So I'll press FFmpeg video. And then on the encoding, I'm going to set this to MPEG-4. And the video codec, I'll have a H.264. I'll just leave this at medium quality and good. And then if you have any audio, you can check the audio. I use ACC or MP3, but we're not going to have any audio here, so I just won't check the audio. So those are my video settings, but you can test out stuff, but this is what I found to be the best for me. And I do need to make a name for this, so I'll just call it final video or something like that on the output. So now it has a name. And now you can just save this, or just press Control F12. And here's the final animation. So this is the tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to, you can leave a link in the comments with your final result. If you do the tutorial and you post it online, I'd like to see what you guys create. And if you want to support this channel, I have a Gumroad store and a Blender Market store, and I also have a few other links to some other sites that I sell stuff on if you want to support this channel. I'm selling most of my tutorials, so if you want to download the tutorial, get the final renders, and get the video file that you can actually download and do the tutorial off YouTube, you can also do that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.